What if I told you that right now, as you're watching this, there's something sitting just 4 feet below your backyard? Something that's been there since before your house was built, before your neighborhood existed, before anyone in your family ever paid a single heating bill. And it's been offering to heat your home for free, every single winter, without fuel, without electricity, without a subscription, without anything. And the system that could tap into it costs less than a decent dinner for 4 at a restaurant? Yeah, let that sink in for a second. Because what I'm about to show you isn't a solar panel pitch. It isn't some off-grid fantasy that only works if you live in the mountains with 17 acres and a trust fund. This is a buried pipe, a trench, a concept so embarrassingly simple that when most people first hear it, they laugh, until they see the gas bills of the people who actually built it. Then nobody's laughing anymore. There's a man in rural Ohio, let's call him Gerald, because that's close enough to his real name that it doesn't matter, who, in 1986, at 43 years old, decided he was done handing money to the gas company every January. Gerald wasn't an engineer, he wasn't a scientist. He was a guy with a bad back, a tight budget, and a shovel. He dug a trench across his backyard over the course of a single weekend. No contractor, no machine rental. Just a man, a hole in the ground, and a length of pipe from the hardware store. That winter, his gas bill dropped from $96 a month to $31. He thought the meter was broken. He called the gas company. They sent someone out. Meter was fine. So Gerald started keeping a notebook. He wrote down the temperature outside every morning. He wrote down what his furnace ran. He tracked his bill every single month, not for a season, not for a year, but for 3 consecutive years. And the result never changed. In fact, by the third winter, the numbers were slightly better than the first. Today, Gerald's January heating bill is still lower in actual dollars, not adjusted for inflation, not percentage-wise, actual dollars, than it was nearly 4 decades ago. He has never upgraded the system. He has never called a repairman. The ground did all the work, and it has never once asked to be paid. Now here's where this gets genuinely strange. Because that story isn't unique. It isn't a one-off miracle in one weird corner of Ohio. There are documented cases of this working in Minnesota, in Canada, and Germany, in places where winter is not a minor inconvenience, but a months-long assault on your comfort and your bank account. And the physics behind it isn't mysterious or cutting edge. It's actually so well understood, so thoroughly proven, that the real mystery isn't whether it works. The real mystery is why you've never heard of it. And I promise you, by the time this video is over, you will have a very clear answer to that question, and it's going to make you uncomfortable in a way that has nothing to do with temperature. So let's start from the ground up, literally. Picture this. You're standing in your backyard in the middle of January. The air around you is maybe 8 degrees Fahrenheit. Your face hurts. Your breath fogs. You want to go inside immediately. Now imagine digging straight down. 4 feet, that's it. Not 20 feet, not 50 feet. Just 4 feet below the surface of your lawn. At that depth, the soil temperature is somewhere between 50 and 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Not because of anything you did, not because of any system or technology, just because of the way the earth stores energy. The ground acts like a massive thermal battery. All summer long, it absorbs heat from the sun and from the warm air moving across it. It stores that heat slowly, gradually, deep into its layers. And then when winter arrives and the surface freezes, the heat doesn't just vanish. It stays down there, locked into the soil, releasing slowly, maintaining that remarkable stability season after season, year after year, decade after decade. This isn't new information. Geologists have known this for over a century. HVAC engineers have known this for decades. The USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, actually published a document, written in plain English for ordinary homeowners, explaining exactly how to build an underground air inlet, how deep to dig it, how long to make it, how to connect it to a house. That document existed. It was accessible. And then, quietly, over time, it disappeared from mainstream building guides. We'll come back to why in a moment, because that part of the story is where things go from interesting to genuinely infuriating. But first, here's what happens when you connect the dots between that stable underground temperature and your screaming heating bill. Imagine this. Your furnace is not a magic box. It's a gap-closing machine. It takes the air that enters your home and heats it to a livable temperature, usually around 70 degrees. The problem is where that air is starting from. On a brutal January night in the Midwest, your furnace might be trying to heat air that's coming in at 5, 8, maybe 10 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a gap of over 60 degrees that it has to close, burning fuel every single second of that process. Every degree of that gap is costing you money. Every BTU your furnace burns to close that gap is showing up on your bill at the end of the month. Now here's the question that changes everything. What if you could shrink that gap before the air ever reached your furnace? What if instead of pulling in 8-degree air from outside and forcing your furnace to heat it 62 degrees, you pre-warmed that air using something you already own, the earth beneath your property, so that by the time it reached your furnace, it was already at 50, 52, maybe 55 degrees? Now your furnace only has to close a gap of 15 to 20 degrees instead of 60 plus. The same furnace, the same house, dramatically less work, dramatically less fuel, dramatically lower bill. That is the earth tube system. And it is almost offensively simple. Here's what happens. You dig a trench approximately 4 feet deep across your property. You lay a pipe through that trench, typically somewhere between 40 and 60 feet long. One end of the pipe pokes up outside your home with a simple intake cap to keep animals and debris out. The other end connects into your home's ventilation system or air return. That's it. When air is drawn into the pipe from outside, either by natural pressure differences or a small fan no more powerful than a light bulb, it travels the length of that buried pipe, surrounded on all sides by soil sitting at 50 to 58 degrees. Heat naturally moves from warmer material to cooler material. It's the same reason your coffee gets cold, the same reason ice cream melts on a warm day. The soil is warmer than the incoming winter air, and so heat transfers into the air as it moves through the pipe. By the time it exits into your home, that 8-degree outside air has climbed to 40, 45, sometimes even 50 degrees, without burning anything, without any ongoing fuel cost, without any utility company involved in any way. Researchers in Canada ran a controlled study where they installed underground air tubes and measured performance across an entire winter. Outside air came in below freezing. It exited the system significantly warmer, without electricity. Oh, without combustion, without any fuel source whatsoever. In Minnesota, where winter temperatures regularly reach levels that would make a polar bear uncomfortable, a home using this system documented incoming air being warm by over 40 degrees Fahrenheit before it ever touched the heating system. These aren't theories or projections. These are measured results from actual systems in the actual ground in actual American winters. And the cost of building one of these? This is the part that makes people genuinely angry when they find out. The pipe itself, depending on diameter and material, can cost under $100. A simple intake cap, a small inline fan if you want to boost airflow, some basic connectors. Total cost for many setups is under $300. Some people have built functional versions for less than $150. And once it's in the ground, the maintenance is essentially nothing. There's no filter to replace every month, no service contract, no annual inspection that costs more than the system itself. The earth doesn't send you a bill. Now, you might be wondering about one specific thing, because if you've done any reading on this topic, you've probably encountered it as the main argument against earth tubes, condensation. And it's a legitimate concern, so let's address it head on rather than glossing over it the way some people do, because understanding this is the difference between building something that works flawlessly for 30 years and building something that grows mold inside your walls. Here's what happens. When warm, moist air from outside moves through a cooler pipe, some of that moisture condenses on the inner surface of the pipe, just like the outside of a cold glass on a humid summer day. If the pipe is installed flat, or even worse, with a slight upward slope, that water sits inside the pipe. Stagnant water in a dark, enclosed space is exactly what mold needs to thrive. This is the most common failure point in poorly designed earth tube systems, and critics of the concept are absolutely right to point it out when the design is bad. But the fix is not complicated. The pipe must be installed with a continuous downward slope toward the intake end, about 1 inch of drop for every 10 feet of pipe length. That's a gentle but consistent grade that causes any condensation to drain naturally back toward the outside intake rather than pooling in the middle of the pipe. At the lowest point, a simple drain allows that water to exit the system entirely. With proper drainage, moisture doesn't accumulate. Without standing water, mold doesn't grow. Studies of correctly installed systems have found no significant microbial growth, even after years of continuous operation in humid climates. The concept isn't the problem. The execution is everything. And the execution, done right, is not complicated. So if this system is real, proven, affordable, simple to build, and documented by researchers on multiple continents, including by the United States government's own agricultural publications, then why does practically nobody know about it? Why isn't this taught in every home improvement store? Why isn't every contractor offering it as a standard option? Why is your neighbor still paying $400 a month in heating bills, while something 4 feet underground could be doing half the work for free? Here's the uncomfortable answer. There's an organization called the American Gas Association. You've almost certainly never thought about them, but there's a very good chance you contribute money to their interests every single month through your gas bill. Their stated mission is to support and protect the natural gas industry. And according to public filings and reports that are available to anyone who looks, they have specifically identified alternative heating methods, including passive systems, as direct threats to their industry's revenue. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's a publicly documented strategic position. Over the past several decades, lobbying efforts tied to the fossil fuel energy sector have shaped building codes in states across the country. Regulations have been written that protect natural gas infrastructure and create friction for alternatives. And here's the quiet mechanism that most people never notice. Systems like earth tubes often don't have a defined category in modern residential building codes. They aren't listed, they aren't approved. They aren't rejected either. They simply don't exist in the framework. And when something doesn't have a category, contractors can't easily get permits for it. When contractors can't get permits, they don't offer it. When contractors don't offer it, homeowners never ask about it. When homeowners never ask, the industry never has to explain why they'd rather you keep paying for gas every month. The knowledge didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because it works too well. And this isn't even modern technology being suppressed. Variations of underground air heating have been used for centuries. European farmers were running air through underground stone channels, long before anyone had a gas bill to pay. They used it to keep root cellars at stable temperatures, to protect livestock from extreme cold, to ventilate barns without letting winter air destroy everything inside. Communities like the Amish in the United States have used similar principles for generations, not because they're technophobes, but because they have a fundamentally different relationship with dependency, a system that operates without monthly payments, without utility infrastructure, without any company's permission or pricing structure. That kind of system represents a form of freedom that's genuinely difficult to put a price on. Here at Secret Vault, we've spent a lot of time looking at exactly these kinds of stories, the documented, proven, affordable solutions that somehow never make it into the mainstream conversation about how Americans heat and cool their homes. And every time, the pattern is the same. The physics works. The history is real. The barrier isn't technical. The barrier is awareness, and sometimes something more deliberate than that. But here's the thing about the ground beneath your feet. It does not care about lobbying. It does not care about building codes or industry associations or market share. It just sits there, 4 feet down, holding it steady, 50 to 58 degrees, day after day, month after month, year after year. It's been doing that since before your house was built. It'll be doing it long after your current furnace is scrap metal. The only variable, the only thing that changes, is whether you choose to use it. Let's also talk about what happens over time, because this is something that surprises people. Earth tube systems don't just maintain their performance. They actually improve slightly in the first few years of operation. Here's why. When you first install the system, the soil immediately surrounding your pipe is at its natural baseline temperature. But as the pipe runs air through it season after season, the thermal exchange gradually stabilizes the zone of soil around the pipe. The heat exchange becomes slightly more efficient. By the second or third winter, many homeowners document performance that's 5 to 10% better than the first year. Then it levels off and just continues operating at that improved efficiency, year after year, indefinitely. You're not installing something that degrades, you're installing something that matures. Think about what that actually means financially. Say your heating bill averages $250 a month through the winter months. Even a 40% reduction, which is conservative based on documented real-world results, saves you $100 a month. That's $400 to $500 over a heating season. Your initial investment is under $300. You break even in your first winter. Every winter after that is pure savings. Over 10 years, that's potentially $4,000 to $5,000 staying in your pocket instead of going to a utility company that has been raising rates every few years, regardless of market conditions, regardless of your financial situation, regardless of anything except their own revenue targets. And that's just the financial math. The other thing, Gerald in Ohio will tell you, and the thing that doesn't show up in any spreadsheet, is what it feels like to open a January heating bill and not feel dread. There's something psychologically significant about having a heating system that doesn't depend on anyone else's pricing decisions, something that the earth provides for free, that no company can put a meter on, that no regulation can take away once it's in your ground and connected to your house. Gerald has watched natural gas prices fluctuate wildly for nearly 4 decades. He's watched his neighbors argue about whether to upgrade their furnaces, whether to switch to electric heat pumps, whether to install solar. He just keeps his notebook, looks at his bill, and says the same thing every January, still lower than 1986. Now, I want to ask you something directly. What was your heating bill last January? Not an estimate, the actual number on the actual bill. Because if you're like most American homeowners, it was higher than it needed to be. Not because your furnace is broken, not because your house is particularly drafty, but because the air your furnace was trying to heat started at a temperature that the earth beneath your property could have pre-warmed for free, and nobody told you that was an option. That knowledge has been available for decades. It's been published, it's been studied, it's been proven in cold climates that make most American winters look mild. The people who've built these systems aren't technical geniuses or eccentric off-gridders. They're ordinary homeowners who found out the same thing you're finding out right now and decided to act on it instead of just nodding along and going back to paying full price. This is the kind of thing Secret Vault was built to bring to the surface. No pun intended. Information that exists, that works, that's affordable, that's been proven over decades of real-world use, but that somehow never makes it into the conversation you're supposed to be having about your home, your money, and your choices. Because when the people who profit from your ignorance are the same people funding the industry groups that shape what contractors learn and what building codes allow, information doesn't disappear by accident. But here's the final thing I want to leave you with. Because all of this, the history, the physics, the money, the industry angle, all of it points to one simple, actionable truth. You have land. Under that land, 4 feet down, there's a stable, reliable, completely free heat source that has been sitting there every winter of your life waiting for you to use it. The system to access it costs less than a set of tires. It requires no ongoing payments, no service contracts, no subscription to anything. It gets slightly better over time and then just keeps working, year after year, the way Gerald's has since Ronald Reagan was in the White House. The ground beneath your house has never changed. It has never raised its rates. It has never gone offline during a storm. It has never sent you a bill. The only question, the only one that matters at this point, is whether you're going to use what it's offering or keep paying someone else to do a job the Earth has been volunteering for all along.